Hello and welcome. This is Ancient Wisdom for a Modern World. I am your host, Jim Phillips. It is through the application of ancient wisdom in our modern world that we gain a greater understanding and experience of the truth of who we are. Never has there been a time in the history of humanity when there's a greater need to understand this truth. And it is this truth that will set us free. Before I begin today's episode, I want to invite you to subscribe to the Ancient Wisdom for a Modern World podcast at sacredstoriesmedia.com, where you can also listen to inspirational messages by my Sacred Stories colleagues. Additionally, if you'd like more information on my work, my message, and free downloads, please visit my personal website at www.prosperitybydesign.com. And lastly, I'm excited to announce that my book, The Key to Life, is now available for pre-order at sacredstoriespublishing.com, as well as amazon.com and barnesandnoble.com. And the official launch date is April the 4th. And now for today's episode. The only thing to fear is fear itself. This is a statement I believe that many, if not most of us, have heard. In fact, fear is the basis of terrorism. Make the people of the world believe the world is an unsafe and scary place. Make them live in fear of what might happen if they're not in compliance with those that perpetuate this fear. And the unfortunate thing is that those that succumb to the fear of terrorists change the manner in which they live. They limit their experience of life based on this fear. But what about the fear we create in our own minds and lives that prevents us from living as fully and completely as we can? What about the limiting beliefs we hold and perpetuate out of the fear of what others might think or say, or the fear of the stigma placed on us by society if we don't conform to what society says is acceptable? Well, this is the fear I want to discuss. It's the fear associated with anything that would deny the full experience and expression of ourself in whatever form we're inspired to express. And living one's life out of this type of fear is what I call fearsightedness. Fearsightedness is a condition of the mind that causes a person to view life as always difficult, always challenging, fearful, always full of obstacles. And no matter where someone suffering from fearsightedness might look, everything is colored by their fear of what they believe might happen. And the key here is what they believe might happen. And usually that's a worst case scenario, and that's regardless of any decision or action they might take. I think it's fair to say that we all know or have met people who view life in this way. They're not easy to be around, and they're the type that can walk outside on a gorgeous, beautiful, sunny day. And instead of enjoying and appreciating the beauty of the day, they'll say, "Yeah, but there's a storm brewing somewhere." Fearsightedness robs a person of their personal power. Can you imagine your life filled with constant worry about potential difficulties or tragedy, or events from the past without giving any thought to the possibility that something wonderful or positive could happen? You're always looking for the proverbial second shoe to drop. A favorite quote of mine about life that really addresses this whole issue of fearsightedness is by French philosopher Michel de Montaigne. "My life has been full of many terrible misfortunes, most of which never happened." The majority of those terrible misfortunes never come to pass, and yet, because of the amount of energy and emotion one might put towards those fears, they have an experience of them as if they're taking place. And in fact, in some cases, the amount of energy and emotion placed toward the fear is enough to attract those circumstances into their lived experience. This, of course, then supports their belief that life is fearful, because these bad things continue to happen to me. Worry and concern takes us out of the present moment and blinds us to what life is offering. Being out of the present moment, we're unavailable or receptive to the goodness and beauty of life. Imagine how much of the goodness of life is missed when life is viewed through the eyes of fearsightedness. Imagine the limited experience and expression of oneself if their focus is always on what might happen to them or around them, instead of what they might create that fosters joy and love and happiness. And although it's easier said than done, don't worry about what happened or what might happen. Concern yourself only with the actions you can take now, in this moment, to live or move toward the life experiences you desire. What happened doesn't matter. What matters is what happens. This doesn't mean that events of the past are insignificant or have no influence on who we are or how we might approach life. It means that whatever happened, happened, and you can't change it. But it doesn't determine who you are and what life will be like from this moment forward unless you allow it to. What matters is who you are and what you do from this moment on. A fear-sighted view centers on the fear of uncertainty, even though uncertainty contains the possibility of something magnificent. Uncertainty is nothing more than not knowing a specific outcome. In and of itself, uncertainty is not difficult. It's not challenging or fearful. However, our thoughts can and do make it so. Looking at uncertainty from a neutral perspective, no thoughts or emotions attached, there's at least a 50-50 chance that something favorable will result. And the percentage always increases in the favor of the belief that is held and the choices and actions that are taken. The point here is that the more we place our focus on the fearful outcome, the more likely we are to have that experience. And conversely, when we step into uncertainty with the expectation that it will result in an incredible, magnificent experience, the more likely we are to create and enjoy that experience. It's funny, but when I ask people what they want most out of life, the most common response is, I just want to be happy. Does this mean that most people are unhappy, or that they believe they could be happier? And if they're unhappy and they know it, well, the question is, why don't they do something to change it? What's preventing their happiness in the first place? What I have observed is that people will go to extremes to defend their misery, and they do so at the expense of their happiness. Of course, this raises the question of why anyone would defend their misery, but we do. We fight for our right to be unhappy, and in so doing, we deny ourselves the experience of the life we say we want. Let's look at what is meant by misery. And here's an official definition of misery that's in the Merriam-Webster Dictionary: a state of great unhappiness and emotional distress. Now, we often associate misery with physical pain and long-term discomfort. However, within the context of this topic, misery is in reference to unhappiness and emotional distress. Our misery results from the sameness and the mundane of everyday life, the feeling of being stuck with life as it is with no apparent way out. It's the belief that we must do things out of an obligation or responsibility, and therefore we put the experiences we truly desire on the so-called back burner. Yes, I know there are things to which we've made a commitment, like supporting our family, showing up at work each day, paying our bills, etc. But these are not the limit of who we are and what we're here to create and experience. Our primary cause of misery is self-denial. It's an unwillingness to take responsibility for our lives and allow for the fullest experience and expression of who we truly are that is persistent in its desire to be expressed. Life is limitless in what it offers as our experience. We're always at a point of choice where we can choose how we will experience life, even when it comes to choosing happiness over misery, regardless of the circumstances in which we find ourselves. A favorite quote of mine by Henry David Thoreau sums this up beautifully. Most men live lives of quiet desperation and go to the grave with their songs still in them. What's your song? Well, quite simply, it's the expression of your true self in whatever form you choose. What are you inspired to do or be that you know would bring you an experience of joy and happiness? What have you not given yourself permission to create and experience? The answers to this question will help you identify the ways in which you are defending your misery at the expense of your happiness. Here's a few examples. I can't because. Just fill in the blank. How you complete this statement is in defense of your misery. Remaining where I am is easier or more convenient than what I believe is necessary to move on. And yet, all we need to do is choose to allow the experience of what we desire to experience. Another example, blaming other people or events for where you are in life, instead of taking responsibility. It's only when we take responsibility for our life experiences that we can change them. Or another, worry and concern, allowing fear over what might happen or has happened to take precedence over what we can create and experience that is in alignment with our self-expression and our desire for happiness. The belief that we're not worthy. Living from the belief that this is the life we've been given, that there's absolutely nothing we can do to change it. We believe, for whatever reason, that there's others much more deserving than we are to have the opportunity for happiness. Being afraid of what might be lost in the process instead of excited, joyful, and motivated about what will be gained. You see, we never lose anything that's in alignment with and beneficial to who we are and are in the process of becoming and experiencing. Then there's a fear of losing the happiness once we gain it. The thought is, every time I gain something, it is taken from me. Please understand that happiness is a state of being in this world and is not dependent on anything, any person, or any event. Happiness is our full expression, understanding, and relationship with ourself and the divine. And then there's uncertainty, fear of the unknown. We become comfortable with the known and therefore are more willing to remain in our misery, even though the unknown holds the potential for our greatest experience and expression of who we truly are. These limiting beliefs and thoughts we hold acts as blinders, offering a very limited view of the potential life offers. These statements we make to ourselves, mostly subconsciously, are nothing more than excuses for not taking responsibility for our life experiences. But I'm here to tell you that nothing can be further from the truth. We are responsible for our life experiences. Our outward experience of life only reflect our inward thoughts, beliefs, and feelings. Let me put it more succinctly. They reflect our relationship with ourselves, how and what we think, believe, and feel about ourselves. So how do we move out of a life of quiet discontent or misery into a life of happiness, joy, and full expression? First and foremost, it's by simply choosing to. It's choosing to have that life of joy and happiness. It's also trusting our inspiration, our intuition, ourself. It's knowing your song and the why for having the desire to sing it. It's knowing that you have nothing to lose by doing so other than the misery within which you have chosen to live. It's also knowing that life, the universe, doesn't want you to live in misery. However, it is compelled to support you in whatever choices you make. Choose consciously. Choose wisely. When we take the time to question and explore what we believe and why we believe it and why we make the decisions we do, we'll always make better and more empowering decisions. By questioning what and why we believe what we believe, we can change our perspective from what we believe we can't do to what we're fully capable of doing. We can then move out of fearsightedness to clearsightedness and are more likely to make decisions that move us in the direction of the experiences we desire rather than experiences we fear. Fearsightedness is corrected through clearsightedness, whereby we are aware, consciously aware, of who we are and what we are capable of creating and experiencing. We become more trusting and respectful of ourselves, more trusting in the goodness of life. We know now that the universe, that God, wants us to live a life of joy, of peace, of love, happiness, and overall well-being. With clearsightedness, we see life through eyes of possibility and potential, not fear or limitation. We see life with the blinders of fear removed. An important aspect of clearsightedness is acknowledging and accepting that a large part of life on earth is the experience of our vulnerability. Stuff's going to happen that we don't expect that can alter our lives from that moment on. The interesting thing is this presents our greatest challenge and perhaps greatest benefit or opportunity. The truth is, our physical body is at all times, in fact at any given time, subject to the possibility of pain and suffering. And this is where the opportunity to experience the expanse of our personal power is offered. It is where we can rise above our self-perceived limitations and claim our spiritual heritage and our spiritual beingness. I think that most of us can acknowledge that life is difficult, and yet we continue to individually and collectively make choices that further complicate life, making it more difficult than it needs to be. Why do we choose war over peace? Why do we choose to smoke or drink or take drugs? Why do we choose to sit in front of a television or a computer screen? Why do we choose not to exercise? Why do we choose to believe things that are not true? Why do we choose to defend our misery at the expense of our happiness? I mean, think about it. How different might life be if we moved from the fear of what we think might happen to the potential of what we can make happen? By correcting fearsightedness through the corrective lens of possibility and potential, we free ourselves to more fully experience and express who we are while receiving all that life has to offer. It is unfortunate that we are too often fearful of what might happen instead of emboldened by what we might create. So how do we move beyond this fear? Well, most of us have heard or read the definition of fear as it expressed through the acronym of its letters, FEAR, false evidence appearing real. Now, some might have heard or read of another lesser known, and this is really a more tongue-in-cheek acronym, Forget Everything and Run. And while both give a perspective on fear, neither gets to the truth of fear, which is that it is an illusion that controls many of our decisions and subsequently our life experiences. Now, fear as I am describing it here is not the fear associated with imminent danger in any given moment. It's the fear we associate with what has already happened or what we fear might happen. Fear that we associate with imminent danger is quite interesting, though, in that in the moment we are not actually fearful. We're in a heightened state of awareness, and therefore more acutely alert to what is happening around us. In this heightened state of awareness, we're fully present to the moment. Fear is just a construct of the mind. It doesn't exist anywhere but within the mind, and yet we experience the effects of it within the physical body. It has nothing to do with imminent danger, but everything to do with choices we make, actions we take, and ultimately the life we experience. Since fear is a construct of the mind, it can be deconstructed with the use of these 4 tools of empowerment. And as you will read, fear can be deconstructed by fear itself. FEAR is the acronym for these 4 tools of personal empowerment. The first one, F, fearlessness. Now, your first thought might be that if you lived fearlessly, then you wouldn't experience fear and there'd be nothing to deconstruct. And while this is true, it does take being bold and courageous in the face of that perceived fear to live fearlessly. It means stepping across the threshold of certainty into the unknown with the joyous anticipation that what you desire to experience is what will result. To live fearlessly, you must fear less. You must understand the nature of fear and recognize that most of what you fear has no substance or validity. You must have faith that whatever you have been inspired to create and experience is intended, and therefore will be fully supported as you bring that inspiration to life. Living fearlessly is not only fully trusting oneself. Living fearlessly is knowing that no matter what happens, it happens for you and not to you. The second letter in our acronym of fear is E, engage. Fully engage in life. Take action despite the feelings of fear you might have. Nothing disperses fear like action taken towards the experiences you desire. Nothing creates momentum like fully engaging in the creation process. As you engage in life, you expand your experience of self and therefore your personal power. The more you experience your personal power, the more you realize how truly powerful you are. The impact we allow fear to have on our life is in direct proportion to the degree to which we exercise and experience our personal power. The next letter in our acronym of fear is A, awareness. Be aware of the limits you've placed on yourself through your perceived fears. Recognize the opportunities that are and have always been available to you, but were not seen due to the blindness imposed by your fear. Declare that enough is enough and that you no longer subordinate your personal power to fear. Make choices out of your enhanced awareness that lessen or eliminate the impact of fear and lead to the experiences you desire. Fear is deconstructed by your awareness of it, feeling it, acknowledging it, and owning it as something you created and continue to hold on to. Allow life to flow without resistance, and you'll experience it as it was intended for your greatest experience and expression of yourself. And the last letter in our acronym is R, release. Let go of any attachments to thoughts or beliefs you hold of yourself and life that in any way limits your fullest experience and expression of yourself and life. Fear results from placing more value on the opinion of the world than your own. When we place more value on the opinion of the world, we're in constant fear of not living up to that opinion. And in truth, the only opinion that matters is yours. Release any attachments to the outcome, especially those that are less than what you're capable of creating and experiencing. Release any attachment to the way you think life should be. Allow and embrace the beauty and perfection of the way life is. Release any attachment to who you believe you are. Live in authenticity. Authenticity is living from the core and depth of your being. It is living in truth and transparency. When you're transparent, and therefore living in truth, there is nothing to fear. And understand that fear is an ally. Fear stands as a doorway to our greater understanding and experience of ourself and higher consciousness. All we must do is fearlessly cross the threshold. I want to thank you for your time today. You have many opportunities towards which you can invest this precious time, and yet you've chosen to spend it with me. I want you to know how greatly it is appreciated. If you have comments or questions on today's episode, or if you have suggestions for a future podcast, you can email me at jim@prosperitybydesign.com. I look forward to continuing our conversation as we bring more ancient wisdom into our modern world that will change not only our personal lives, but the world as we know it into a more peaceful, more loving, more kind, and joy-filled experience for all. Until next time, I'm Jim Phillips, and you've been listening to Ancient Wisdom for a Modern World.